And we are back, and Happy New Year. It's Future Forward. Gene, glad to see you again.
Good to see you, Steve. Happy New Year. Sorry I couldn't make last week, a little under the weather.
We're glad you're back. So we have a packed show.
Yeah.
We're going to begin as we always do with our loving and hating section, and you brought a particularly passionate, loving software piece to the show. So let's just start out right there.
Yeah, and this I have same passion on hating this time. So so Minecraft is the passionate, loving, and I'd like to think that as an analyst-ish person, I would have been onto this if I did not have a 10-year-old son who prefers the nerdy to the outdoor. But it is an extraordinary and undertold technology story. My main theme is that this is every bit as important to the tech industry and to Microsoft as YouTube has been to Google. And so the snapshot from a business point of view, and you're probably seeing some visuals, and then I'll explain it. It's a multiplayer game that operates on many platforms, but started PC. Started in 2011 by some Swedish developers, and in 2015 was acquired for $2.5 billion by Microsoft. What you'll also see, and so what is it? Well, it's almost a perfect combination of where computer games were heading, one, two, The Sims kind of build your world thing, three, Dungeons and Dragons and that ilk, because you have a very kind of Camelot-ish world with swords and all sorts of other things, but you're in a legitimate 3D simulated world, which is interesting because it's square and pixel based rather than hyper realistic, but somehow ends up being more realistic. And it's just an amazing thing, has sold, gosh, it must be going on 150 million copies, has ecosystems into the app world on YouTube videos, and it's just remarkable, and it involves a certain amount of half programming that makes it especially magical and worth doing for my kid.
So, do you think the reason it's not better known is just because Microsoft isn't a hip brand at the moment?
I think it's a really good point, and I think it's two things. I think one is it exists within a we're not going to blog about this backwater of 8 to 14-year-old boys. And the second, though, is Microsoft. And I think what Microsoft's doing with this, there is a remarkable video that's included in the package here that you'll be able to see, which unfortunately is a 3 years old holo 3D VR simulation of what Minecraft could become in the hands of Microsoft. And if they do something with that and they bring real consumer marketing instead of, which we're going to get to in a second, ironically, Outlook Windows marketing, it would be something. But I don't know, Steve, because they've done the job with Xbox, and so why can't they do the job with this?
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna put that in the loving category and move on a little bit to your this week's hateable Gene segment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So explain, like, is it just mail and calendar? Like, what you've got a
Well, yeah, it's a good question, because what I sent to you was calendaring and address book, and really that may risk conflating some things. But if you think of the core and the heart of what Outlook used to represent for an insane number of people, and I say before the world ended in 1997, but that it's really more between then and the beginning of iOS and smartphones that the world fell apart for us, which is to say it has become impossible to navigate back and forth between our mobile devices, our desktops, and increasingly each other. By that I mean my family and whatever. My wife and I are still sometimes working off our wedding invite list from 1997, and I have we should have shown you. Maybe we can pull it for later. I probably have 11 entries for you in my address book. Why does it connect with calendaring? Well, it's because they're the same kind of utility that seems boring, and of all people, Microsoft didn't realize what a gold mine it needed to sort of stay with. the irony, and we don't have a lot of time for this, so I'll try to shortcut it, is that a beautiful app showed up about 4 years ago called Sunrise, and it had an elegant interoperability and a way that it was using the movements of the iPhone and the heuristics in a remarkable manner. But of course, the inevitable way of all these things is Microsoft acquired it, and I got a note 2 years ago saying Sunrise is being sunsetted into Outlook over the next 4 months. You're going to have to find a new solution. So there's so much we could talk about here.
So what about you? Also, what about Droopy? I don't even know how to pronounce.
I included Droopy not because it was so remarkable, because honestly, the story that you see there is a 2-year-old story, but there have been, gosh, no less than probably a dozen very prominent, we will solve your address book, we will solve junk mail, we will solve calendaring. It's all about APIs and interoperability between 3 principal villains / can't do withouts. Microsoft, and I don't use Windows and haven't in ages, but I'm still sort of attached to Exchange, Apple and Google. And so, but all these ventures fold or get acquired and melt into other apps. And I cannot make my Google Calendar work as my primary calendar on my iPhone. The powers conspire against it. That is iOS.
Which brings us, I think, elegantly and almost like we planned it, to the first big think segment of the show.
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Because Facebook, so let's first talk about, I mean, did it rock your world when they made this announcement that first Zuckerberg said he was going to, quote, fix Facebook, and then that he was going to do that by essentially throwing publishers off the platform? Like, did that rattle in your brain, or was it like it's just another Zuckerberg thing?
No, it didn't. It didn't even make me blink. He's reminding me a little bit of Al Gore in the year 2000. He's following what the leads and the press and what everyone seems to be saying more than it is things that feel like they're coming naturally out of him. And so he's responding to an avalanche of criticism that he might have fucked up democracy. Not a light burden, by the way.
By the way, as he said, my kids are going to say to me, "Daddy, what did you build?" And I mean, you have to think about it from his perspective. He's way past worrying about losing the family fortune, right?
Right, exactly. Yep.
So, he's at the end of life place that Bill Gates got to at the very end, where he said, "I'm going to go be a billionaire and give away money because I'm going to do good work."
Well, look, Steve, I think there's three vectors on this thing. One is what we're talking about right now, which is Zuckerberg, the greater meaning, how important, he is as this sort of inventor. The second is tactically what the heck's going on in that news feed and what does it matter and what will change. And the third is more of, I think, Facebook, the company, because if you don't sit back and say, well, wait a minute, what does it have to do with advertising? It's about that, whether that's overt or covert or unconscious, because they're not going to do anything that slows down. And if anything, they're worried that they might be flattening off on advertising. That's just my hunch with no data behind it.
And yet the market reacted terribly, and the stock dipped, and publishers all cried, the world is ending.
Because I think it was a little meaningless. Until we see what it is, it's hard to know. And I think there's a big issue here that I'd love your response, because you're a good newsie on this stuff, which is, my perception is, talk about conflation, is that, yeah, I got a lot of news and journalism and media in the last year through Facebook, but it was mostly because people were passing on links and passing on and liking and whatever else. And so I don't know how he's going to peel that back. I don't know a lot of people that spend their time force feeding the New York Times without community into their news feed,
I think, well, again, they tested this new news feed in a couple of international markets, and publishers got crushed.
Yeah. Well, how would you describe what the change really is? Because when you say your friends and family, what do they mean? Do they just mean no presence, no allowed to to let me see things unbidden from the Times?
I have a theory, and the theory is that if you and I want to communicate on Facebook and share political links amongst ourselves, he's fine with that. What he doesn't want is for, if all you want to do, and he essentially wants you to be able to create your filter bubble and say, nothing's going to get through to your news feed from a political source or a news source that you haven't chosen.
Or that you don't like? I mean,
Yeah,
is it
or that you don't like. Exactly right.
Oh,
But I don't know how it's getting in there before that. That's why it doesn't make sense.
yeah, and I also don't know why you would do that, because the dialogue and the actual having people together, it may get a little ugly at times, but at least there's a dialogue in some of those back and forths between right and left human beings, it's a lot more meaningful than the kind of cacophony of nonsense that you see on like YouTube messages, because that's more of an open public forum. But that's not what this is about. We could talk for a long time about this. What? Yeah.
I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
So here's my optimistic, the world isn't ending thought. If Zuckerberg and Facebook dial down publishers that I like and force me to have to go get one-on-one relationships with them, sign up for Variety, sign up for the New York Times, sign up for Business Insider, sign up for Washington Post. If what he's doing is saying, this one size fits all, being responsible for all of the content that consumers get through this little narrow pipe called newsfeed, is damaging the environment. I'd rather have people have to go and cherry pick those news environments themselves. I think that would be great if that's what he's doing.
Yeah, it's funny. I love the way you said it too, but I don't know what that means practically. I don't know enough. I suspect there's some research that either they have or that they should be having that really gives you a sense of what makes things move a little bit, that you notice them versus not. The 90-20, the 99-1 rule. Is it, if a crazy, outrageous YouTube video starts to go viral, how is that still not going to make it into the center of Facebook? There's not a there yet that I understand.
Well, but back to something you said earlier, which I think was actually very astute. If this is really about advertising,
right?
One of the things that we both know is that advertisers have made it clear since the beginning of time. No advertiser wakes up in the morning and goes, "Hey, can I get my spot next to that story about that plane crash or that starvation or that?" Like, advertisers don't like news. They don't like being near it. They don't like their products being near bad things going on. So if what's been happening to Zuckerberg is he's been starting to hear, when we look at the news feed, it starts to look kind of like a place we don't want to put our...
Wow, Steve, that's you're painting it as this is 50s television emerging, because it needs to be cleaned and protected and censored and
clean and well lit.
Clean and well lit. And I think that is a recipe for disaster on the internet, because if you think that it's just going to be me and my pictures of my kids and that's going to make it, how we're engaged now in a world where we're woke. I'm not sure what this exactly means. Maybe it's about specific news sources. In some ways, he could be so overly literal, it's right in front of us and more narrow than we think, which is it's like what we've happened on Twitter. X number of news sources are not allowed, and things that are over news stories can't just come in and hit you. But everything I get is a past link from someone else. I turn off anything that sort of is some automatic thing because somehow they think I liked it at one point. That whole liked fan following is also a noisy nonsense on Facebook.
Look, I have a friend who goes live all the time.
Right.
And he's a friend of mine, but I don't particularly like his live feed. And I've shut it off. I haven't unfollowed him yet because he's a friend.
Yeah.
But I've said, show me less of this kind of post.
Yeah.
Maybe 50 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
The algorithm could not give a shit.
Well, the fact is the algorithm does not just show me my friends in order and lets me select my friends. I know you've heard me say this before here, but every single time I open Facebook, I go right over and click most recent because I just want the most recent stuff.
Yep.
you know, so anyway, ironically, the coda to this could be that personalization is still kind of a joke, even with the biggest players. It's just blunt instrument stuff that doesn't seem to be onto the nuance of things.
All right, so we're going to keep an eye on this Facebook thing because I think it's going to be a big story, almost
Yeah,
no matter what, and
has
I
to
think
be.
it's going to impact our friends in the media business. Let's pivot a little bit to a story that neither of us claims to be an expert in,
Right.
but one that I think is important and one that we've certainly done a lot of reading on, and that is, what do you really think what is going on with this Bitcoin thing?
Well, there's Bitcoin, you know, the new gold standard, you know, the trading value of it, one. Two, there's Bitcoin, you know, the purely financial next generation way to do transactions. And then there's blockchain and the technology and framework behind Bitcoin and how much it's transforming things far beyond finance. Now, in order, I went from the flightiest and the who cares to stuff that is not even a matter of if, it's already part of the future, right? So there is a reality to this that that is not about what the price of a Bitcoin future is today or not. Now, that being said, I've historically laughed at that stuff without a care and watched it just go up, 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 up. Not saying it wouldn't go up, but just that that's not what's important. It turns out, you know, you still probably could invest in it. But, you know, that's sort of the way I kind of think about it. And I think that there's not a lot more to say until you sit and understand what this kind of distributed encryption model and the sharing and the, you know, let me let you go for a
All
second.
right, so I'm bought in on blockchain
Yes.
as and its importance and its changing of all kinds of things about how people interact and safety and trust and all that.
Yep.
I'm hook, line, and sinker on Bitcoin. You know, I pulled a couple of stories. You know, one about this dog that has his own Bitcoin called Doggy Coin.
Right.
Um, um, and the fact that Kentucky Fried Chicken is now saying they're accepting Bitcoin. I mean, they're like, I guess I don't, I think we're absolutely in a bubble,
Yeah.
and I put some money in early, and I've watched it grow exponentially. But
Good for you.
well, no, if I could get in the time machine and go back, I would have added some zeros.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
you know.
because a dollar becoming 10 is nice, but $1,000 becoming $100,000 is
Okay.
nicer,
All
right?
right. Now I understand.
Um, so, you know, I guess what I worry about with Bitcoin is that the people that are now increasing its like that the smart money has come and gone, and now it's the people who are hearing about it on the street, and buying, I don't even what is it today? Is it 2000? I don't even I didn't
I don't even know. I try to keep away from it.
um and
So
I
yeah,
guess I
I agree.
also here's my
That-
here's my cynicism, and this will get me beaten up in the comments, but I'm going to do it anyway. If the reason why Bitcoin's core audience, the true believers, are fans is because it takes money out of the hands of government and makes it a person-to-person transaction that's not taxable or controllable by the government, they just haven't written the laws yet. I mean,
Yeah, well, that's
the,
true.
they're not gonna. There's no way that world governments, not just the United States, but any other government on the planet, is going to let a taxable, trackable domestic currency turn into this invisible internet thing. They're just not
Right.
going to let it happen.
It can't become dark money, which is
Yes.
kind of what it is, and the combination of that and the libertarian thread through it all probably could undermine it too. Could it, you know, what does it mean to be regulated if it could be regulated and still retain those qualities that you're talking about? Will be interesting. So I
By the
agree
way,
in that sense it's a bubble.
it's gonna make. But by the way, when you say that, I mean it's funny. I've never really. That's really astute. I guess I've never really thought of Bitcoin as fundamentally libertarian, which of course it is.
Well, everything you said sounded like, before the
Yeah.
topic even came up, a libertarian thread. Leave me alone. Let me do whatever it is I want to do. And it's funny, I drove my daughter to the airport to go back to college this morning, and we got into a conversation about libertarianism. And I'll mention it right now because her theory is that there's a an uninformed, unenlightened, natural libertarianism that she sees all around her in like teen and 20 somethings. It's like it's rampant beyond belief. It's like their pituitary imbalance, because of the internet and decentralization and everything else that you can do, their libertarian, it is unrestrained, and they're not really, reading a lot. So anyway.
Well, I mean,
It's a little different topic, but look, I think,
no.
yeah, it's not
I
100%.
believe anyway. All right, so with the few minutes we have remaining, I thought it would be fun for us to start to dig into the whole nature of what's going on in web content, web video content, and
Yeah.
there've been a bunch of big launches, and I thought we'd just talk about the shows and then more broadly about where we think things are going. So let's start with the one that I had the highest hopes for, and frankly am the most disappointed in. I really wanted Letterman to come back as a rock star. I mean, I thought Netflix gave him a good platform. He doesn't have to work every day. He can tape it. He can bring in the guests he wants. He doesn't have to hawk movies he doesn't want to hawk. Like I thought we were gonna see a real next chapter in his career, and I just thought the show was disappointing.
Yeah, I think so far, yes, and I think really it has to do with Letterman's personality and his kind of modality. He's not that it should be Barbara Walters, but in order to have a one-on-one extended interview, let's say Charlie Rose at least, you have to have a certain kind of silly, intellectual worshipfulness with the person. And he's not that kind of person. He can dig in a little bit. Like, his list is going to be pretty short if it's just going to be these people that he admires. And the Obama thing is a little flat. If he can't crack wise, so I think there will be something for him at some point. But and I know it's not to mention now, but I'll mention it in the context, which is that ironically, the Jerry Seinfeld Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee just went onto Netflix for the first time in the last month or so, and it's doing really well, and it's translated well, and it's an interesting contrast in how does somebody have an afterlife after over-the-top cultural prominence in television comedy.
So I'm just going to be really brutally crass here. So Letterman had the vacation beard, right?
Yeah.
He did the what part of I want you to understand I'm not working anymore beard. He grew it beyond any fashion sense. And then Netflix hired him and he said, "Look, here's the deal. I'll do the show, but I'm not losing the beard." And they thought, well, he doesn't really mean that. Once we get in the studio, he'll get his hair cleaned up. He'll get the beard. We'll package him back up. He'll look like David Letterman. And he went, yeah, no, I'm still going to be the beard guy.
It's hard to get past that.
What?
I said it's hard to get past that. Look,
Yeah.
Michael Stipe shaved his beard. Jeez.
and Obama wasn't great either. I mean, the TV review that said, Obama and both didn't seem rusty and off their game, which was the review that we got from the Washington Post. That's kind of how I felt.
Well, I would, if somebody was after that from Obama, I would point to Mark Maron WTF podcast when he had Obama on, which is as close as you could come to sort of striking a little personal chord. But this is what we know about Obama. He was the cool president. His prose in his written work is going to be always more personal and powerful than his incredibly sharp but borderline locker room kind of style of kidding and jabbing and not really letting it get too close.
So which brings us to Black Mirror.
A miracle.
Uh, you know, season 1 was amazing.
Yep.
Season 2 was great. Now we're on season 4. I like season 4. Great, but for whatever reason, I would say not my favorite season, but very good.
Yeah, I've seen one of the new ones, but so far so good. I don't differentiate greatly because it was, of course, created as a kind of Twilight Zone, and like that long-running, old show, each individual episode is its own unique standalone work of art or narrative, and so it does kind of depend, and they bring in different people each time, and so I think it has a spottiness by definition, but I find it to be pretty miraculous that they've escaped the slog of obviousness, which kind of, there's a million things like this out there, and there's another 500,000 that were pitched on the exact same premise, Twilight Zone for the digital age with all the ironies and cosmic blah blah blah, but they've nailed it. They've gotten inside people's it's almost like surrealism. There's a mortal fear in some of those Dali paintings and those old Dada video films that has some sort of soul panic inside of it, and that's where the best ones are. So I don't know. It's it's pretty marvelous, and I hope they can keep it fresh.
Which brings me to the last one, Philip K. Dick, Electric Dreams. On Amazon. So the review that I pulled from the Times says the future seems outdated. It's 12 episodes. I've watched one. It was beautifully art directed, beautifully visualized. The acting was terrific, but it was a little, I don't know how to describe it, little kind of like a snake eating its tail. It was a little inside itself for me. I was like,
yeah.
That being said, I think both Electric Dreams and Black Mirror in different ways are cautionary tales about where technology is taking us if we kind of blindly lead it into the future.
Right.
And I mean, who knows? Maybe Zuckerberg watched Black Mirror and decided he had to fix Facebook.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen it, so I'm getting good vibes from what you're saying. Vibes, not necessarily good. And so I would just sort of add this contextually, which is that Philip K. Dick is kind of hot, right now, not just because of the legacy of the things we've seen over the last 20 years, but this Man in the High Castle series from one of his books, from a short story, I believe, is spectacular. And then I would also just say this, which is, this notion of depicting, it's like theoretically you and I have been a little surface with some of our comments. Letterman's beard and, their art direction is messing things up, but it matters. This stuff, if they're not going to create either an authentic version or something recognizable. I love modern depictions that take like a 50s view of the future or an old-fashioned view of the future when you can tell that's what it is. If you've seen these like escape room kind of submarine game kind of feels, that's a different thing versus just not nailing it, just having some just flat kind of, and a lot of these Netflix shows are like that. But some of them hit it, and they don't have to be sophisticated. They just have to have good stories and good visuals. Are you going to watch?
We have come to the end of our half hour.
Well, let me just ask you this:
Yeah.
Are you going to watch more of an Electric Dreams, or do you just? Is it just?
No, absolutely.
Wait, you are.
And in fact, one of the things the review says is because of the way it's built. If you don't like an episode, just skip it. They're not tied together. The stories aren't. They're standalones. Yeah, I'll give all 12 of them 10 minutes each to see how they do.
Let's put a marker in this and keep covering every once in a while, and also talk about how people are watching video. Maybe get some opinions, because what screen did you watch that on?
Netflix, on
Oh,
my TiVo on my flat screen.
so you got it all the way to the big screen. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about that in the future.
We are out of time, my friend. Have an
All right.
excellent future forward week, and we'll
Yep.
see you back here a week from today.
Onward.
Bye.
So long, Steve.